Almost 800,000 people die every single year because of suicide, and for every suicide, there are 20 attempts for it. Today, I have a suicide prevention speaker with me. Thank you very much for coming, Frank.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You and I both know I'm not here voluntarily. It's all part of a plea bargain. So the audience should know that.
Yeah, so you became first a comedian and then you went into the suicidal prevention stuff, right? Or what is the story behind your jobs?
Yeah. Fourth grade, 9 years old, told my first joke. Kids laughed. Teacher was hysterical. I thought I'm going to be a comedian. 12th grade talent show. I won. 1984, April 1st, April Fool's Day. Did my first open mic night. And halfway through my 5 minutes, I heard a voice inside my head that said, "You're home." Really? 18 months later, said to my girlfriend, now my wife of 38 years, "I'm going on the road to be a comedian. You want to come along for the ride?" Figuring she'd go, "Hell no." She goes, "Yeah." So we were on the road together without a home. I was working clubs. She just came along for 2,629 nights in a row. Seven
Sorry,
years.
could you say that again? 7 years.
Yep. 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop. And then I got a job in radio in my old hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina on a morning show. Did that for about 18 months. By the time I got done with that, meaning fired, the comedy club boom had busted. And so my act had always been clean. I jumped into the corporate comedy circuit, which pays about 10 times as much per evening. Good comic can make $500 in a club a night. A good corporate comic, $5,000 plus travel. So I'm no math major. That made sense. And then the recession hit in the U.S. and worldwide, I guess, 2008, 9, 10. We lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy because people stopped booking anybody to speak. And that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like, literally. Spoiler alert for the audience, I did not pull the trigger. A friend of mine came up after a keynote recently, and he thought he'd be funny. "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I said, "Hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed?" So that's where the humor is in the topic. It's not jokes, it's funny personal things like that. And then when meetings came back, when conferences came back in 2011, 12, people said to me, "Frank, we love you. We just can't book you anymore for $5,000 just to be funny. You've got to teach the audience something." I'd always wanted to do that, had no idea how. A friend of mine wrote a
Mhm.
book. Judy Carter is her name, Carter. She wrote a book called The Message of You, Turn Your Life into a Money-Making Speaking Career. She gave me a copy. She goes, "Frank, you read it. You'll figure it out." So I went into it thinking I got nothing. Halfway through, I thought, I do have something to talk about. Given my near suicide, 2 mental illnesses, there are more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd. I could speak on suicide prevention if I got some training. So I did. And then I thought, yeah, but who's going to take me serious after 2.5 decades of comedy? And I thought I'll do a TEDx. So I applied for my first TEDx. I got it. And then 2 more events called and said, do you have any more mental health topics? Oh, yeah. And I just did my 13th one in April and booked number 14 for next fall. So it's, and I coached TEDx after doing that many, people kept coming to me, "Hey man, I want a TEDx." And a friend of mine, a business coach, called me and she goes, "Frank, I get the feeling you're teaching people how to get a TEDx for free." And this is a quote from her: "That shit's got to stop." So she said, "You got to be charging for that." So I started coaching, charging, and I've been coaching and charging, and 100% of my students who show up and do the work have gotten a TEDx. Some 2, some 3. So it's, but yeah, that's how I got into speaking, was that near suicide, and then I had to I had to reinvent myself as not as a funny speaker, but a speaker who just happened to be funny.
What a story. Wow, just incredible. First of all, congratulations to everything you already achieved and have done in your life. But of course, suicide is a topic that is growing in its importance from day to day, especially here in Germany. We slowly but surely get the hang of it and see it as a problem after many, many years of just looking away. So Why? Why is suicide this present in the modern community?
Well, there are a number of issues. I speak to the top 10 at-risk occupations for suicide in the U.S. Construction being number one. 1,000 people die in construction accidents last year. 5,100 died by suicide. You're 5 times more likely to jump off the building than fall off. So in some industries, it's epidemic. I think social media has a lot to do with it, especially among young people. I think in the U.S., suicide is the number one cause of death for young people, 18 to 25. And I think it has a lot to do with the isolation and such from spending so much time online and social media, and also comparing yourself to others on social media. Everybody's Facebook page is generally a highlight reel, and nobody's life is really like that, but that's the way it appears. So I think social media has a lot to do with it. Um, Women in the U.S., young women, spend 40% less time face to face with their peers than they did 15 years ago. Hanging out at the mall or whatever. They're in their bedroom on their phone, staring into the screen. In the U.S., the average 17-year-old spends 8 hours a day on their screen. I mean, that's just, that's
Yeah, guilty.
yeah, and that's been quite a bit. I mean, I have left my phone behind sometime somewhere, and I'm just like, oh, so I'm just as guilty as young people are. Although I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. LinkedIn because it's business to business. That's my addiction. I'm addicted to LinkedIn, so it's for that reason because it's part of my business. At least that's the excuse I use, Mo. It's part of my business. I need to be on there. I can't be away from my phone. No, I can't.
Yeah,
No,
it's completely the same for me as well. As I'm doing this podcast on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, every single social media platform out there is used for marketing purposes. And about 80% of the time, I'm not marketing anything. I'm just looking at the short form video content on anything on YouTube, anything that is maybe interesting in that moment. Or, he has a great life. Wonder if I will ever have that. And all of that stuff. So it happens a lot when you, of course, try to notice it. Many people are not even noticing it for a few weeks until they see, oh, I'm having 5 hours a day on my screen time. And where's that coming from? So why is social media that big of a deal right now?
well, as American comedian Bill Maher said, it's this generation or these generations, the younger generation, cigarettes. It's an addiction. They use the techniques that they use in Vegas. It's called variable reinforcement. You that's why there are notifications, bings and bongs, like a slot machine. In Vegas nowadays, you put a card, like a key card into a machine with a strip, and so it tracks your gambling habits, and so the computer can figure out just how often it needs to pay off for you to continue sitting there. Back in the day, you just came up, dropped a quarter in, pulled the handle. The machine didn't know anything about you. Didn't
Yeah.
know your spending habits. And so social media is very similar in that, it's you post something on Facebook and then you look, nobody's commented, nobody's shared, nobody's liked. And then you get a notification, ding, and you look, oh, share, little hit of dopamine. Ding, a like, another hit of dopamine. Ding, a comment. And so that's how they keep you on the phone looking at social media because of those, that's why I turn my notifications off. That's one of the things I advise young people to do. Look, if you want to cut your usage down a bit, cut your notifications off. That way, you won't look at it every time it makes a noise. I also recommend they buy a watch, an old style wristwatch with hands, because the average young person looks at their phone, I think, roughly 75 times a day just to get the time. And when they do, of course, well, I'm looking at the clock. Let me see what's on my Facebook. See if anybody liked that post, or Instagram or Twitter. And then, are they watching Instagram, watching the videos? So, just get a real watch. So that when you want to know the time, you look at your wrist and go, oh, I got to get out of here. It's late. Yeah, and I would say for young people, get an accountability partner because, the phone keeps track of your hours on screen during the week. And
Mhm.
get together with a partner. And at the end of the week, see how many hours you each spent online and see if you're okay with that amount of time. Or is it too much, too little? Set a goal. And then at the end of the next week, see if you met your goal for. If I had a family, I would have a digital fast. I'd plug all smart devices into a power strip in the parents' room on Friday evening at 7 p.m. And you can't have them back until 7 a.m. on Monday morning. So you're actually going to have to talk to your folks. I know that's hell. But, yeah, and adults are just as guilty, Mo. I mean, if the parents are staring at their phone at dinner and the kid, you have to set the example.
Yeah.
A friend of mine says that the TV tray back in the day, I can remember when we got our first set of TV trays where you have dinner in front of the TV. He says that was the beginning of the end of the family dinner. And he said the smartphone put the final nail in the coffin because they may be sitting at the same table, but they're not
Not there.
interacting. I wrote a joke one time about a friend of mine. He said she could not get her daughter-in-law to respond to her, in conversation. I said, well, text her. She'll respond. Yeah, don't leave listen, I'm 69. I don't leave messages for anybody anymore, pretty much. I mean, because
Mm.
especially young people don't pick up their voicemail. I
Yeah.
text.
I don't even know
Yeah,
where it is on the phone, but to
exactly.
be completely honest with you.
Yeah, I
Okay.
text.
So there's a smartphone, there's social media, all of that stuff, but still there is a yeah, of course you're comparing yourself to others on the platform as well, and you see how great their life is, and of course sometimes you feel miserable, and then you compare yourself to people who make it seem like they have the best life of their lives at the moment, and that is all there, and I understand everything of it, but it's still a very long way until suicide, until the first suicide thoughts, right? Or can that be enough? Just the alone comparison on social media, can that already lead to suicide? Or what are the next steps that bring you onto the path that you don't see that much sense in your own life?
Well, can begin to lead you down that path. Also, when I was a kid, the bullies were very up close and personal. George Ragland, George Ragland has a locker next to mine in junior high, and he reveled in hitting me in the shoulder for some reason. I don't know why. He was dumb as a brick, but um, when I left the school, I left him behind. Nowadays, people take the bully home in their pockets,
Yeah.
and I've got a friend, a psychiatric nurse, whose daughter was goaded into a suicide attempt. She and her mom were going to go skiing. She put a note on Twitter or whatever about going skiing with my mom. And, Mean Girls started firing back, you're too fat to go skiing. You don't look good. You're going to look like like a snow woman on this. And it was just enough to push her over the edge. Her mom couldn't figure out why she wasn't ready to go. She goes upstairs. She's attempted suicide. Fortunately, her mom got there in time to save her, but it was that peer pressure over the internet and social media that pushed her over the edge. So college, I think, is more competitive nowadays than it was when I was there. It's kind of like the Hunger Games. There's only so many slots at good colleges. So you need to do really well in high school to get into a really good college, and only so many openings. And then if you want to go to graduate school or you want to become a professional of some kind, there's only so many slots in dental school, medical school, veterinary school. So again, you've got to be top of your class. And so the resources are finite, and there's only so many. And then once you get into medical school, well, you you got to do really well to go into a specialty. So I mean, it's a lot like the Hunger Games. There's only so much to go around. The competition is fierce. I mean, people are now hiring college application coaches to help the kids with the application. And I mean, when I was, I was forced to apply on my own. When I was a kid. I had to fill out the application myself. I had to write my little, my 650 word, story about myself. And nowadays, and you can't do it by AI. because colleges now have detectors that can detect if you've used AI to write your 650-word story. I have a friend who's a college admission coach, and she helps. That's the one thing she helps them most with is that 650-word. Make sure they write it themselves. Make sure it's a story that about them. At the end of 650 words, I want to know who you are.
Yeah.
But the pressure's on. Again, you're up against hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students for whatever slots and whatever good schools. So, and in the U.S., men, 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide in the U.S. are men. 8 out of 10. Many
Yeah,
of
that
them.
was the next topic I wanted to go to. Why are men that more doing it more in the end?
Well, there's a toxic masculinity. Basically, big boys don't cry. Men tend not to reach out for help. And in the U.S., the men are generally mostly between the ages of 45 and 54. They have a high school education. They went to work in a manufacturing plant somewhere. They worked their way worked their way up to shop steward. I mean, they got good middle class income, so forth. And people think those jobs went overseas. About 15% of them went overseas. 85% of those jobs that man has or had is taken over by robots and automation, AI. So for men, they tend to tie their identity to their job. So one day you're shop steward in a manufacturing plant, make good middle class wages. The next minute you're not. Who are you?
Mhm.
What are you going to do at 45 or 50 after you've done that, all your life? And it's kind of like being an athlete. You've done nothing but play football all your life, and all of a sudden you get an injury and it's career ending. If I'm not that football player anymore, who am I? So that's for men and in the manufacturing sector. I think that's a big part of it.
So is there an identity crisis in the male community at the moment because they don't really know anymore what to do after AI and all of the other pressures that come with it, of course, and
Yes.
not talking about it?
And men are generally the breadwinner or the biggest breadwinner in the family and take great pride in supporting the family. And now they can't support the family.
Mhm.
And so I'm a co-author on 4 books on men's mental health. It's each book has 12 stories, 12 guys. Each one has a different problem. One of the ones that I'm voicing the books, and one of the chapters is on the tools you can use to help men who are struggling with mental health. And one of the stories was about a guy who did a couple tours in Iraq, and he comes home and with the PTSD and some other issues, and didn't get a lot of help from the military, and eventually life melts down. It's
Mm.
good while things are good, but when things go wrong, they go really wrong. And part of the problem is women tend to reach out to other women when they have issues. Men tend not to. Women tend to add friends during life. Men tend to shed them. And they tend not to reach out.
Yeah, why is it that hard? Because when I think about it, I have a girlfriend and very, very close friends, and I would never say that I'm telling them everything. Of course, the girlfriend, of course, but every time I tell it, we talk about it, I feel better afterwards. But at the same time, always a bit of pride, a bit of ego is dying with it, because at the end of the day, you are the man. You shouldn't put
Yeah, right.
your problems onto the shoulders of your partner. That's at least always in the back of my mind. Why is it? What is wrong about that thought, or how do you see it?
Well, men are raised to be stoic, to be strong and not and be able to. There was a guy that came to one of my presentations. He was a Marine, U.S. Marine. And he thought, I'm a Marine. I need to work my way through this. Marines can work their way through anything. And fortunately, he finally got some help because that's not necessarily the case. But he didn't want to admit that. One of the things I do when I speak is I talk about my mental illness, my near suicide, all the crazy people in my family. And what that does is it gives the people in the audience permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences without worrying about being judged. And so when I get done speaking, there's almost always a line of people who want to share a story, ask a question. I mean, some of the stories are hair raising. I mean, I've talked to people who are, circling the drain. They're just about to jump off the 5th floor of the building where they work. And they've never told anybody. Their workmates don't know it. Their family probably doesn't know it, but they come up after I get done. And I had a guy come up one time. He was crying so hard I couldn't speak. It was a construction worker on a site. I was speaking at the site, and he was crying. And when he finally gathered himself, I said, "Hey, man, what's up?" He said, "Well, I haven't slept in 2 nights. I work on the 5th floor of this building. I think about jumping off every day." I go, "Why is that?" He goes, "Because I've lost 3 people to violence in the last year, including my daughter who died in my arms." And so there's a human resources manager nearby. I waved him over. I said, "Look, you need to take this nice young man by the hand and get him to the nearest mental health facility to where we're standing right this minute and get him evaluated. Just evaluate what's wrong, what's going on, because he is circling the drain." And a couple of months later, I had occasion to talk to the human resources fellow again about coming back next year. And I was terrified to ask. Finally, I worked up my nerve. I said, "Hey, whatever happened to that nice, carpenter that was so frank? He got evaluated, medicated, he's back on the job." But I believe if I hadn't been there to share my story and be vulnerable, that he may have, in fact, eventually jumped off the building because he didn't, wasn't able to share with someone what he was going through.
Whoa. I'm a loss for words right now, but wow.
Yeah, I think people really just need permission. I did a military base, Fort Irwin, U.S. Army Training Center in outside of Barstow, California, and the base psychologist called me a couple of months after I was there, and he said, "Frank, a soldier walked into my office this morning, and he simply said, 'I'm depressed and suicidal, and I'm here because Frank King said I had to tell somebody.'" That's the ROI, the return on investment for me and for bringing me in is those kind of conversations where they feel comfortable enough to go, "Hey, I'm having trouble."
Oh, what would you tell not only to men but all the people outside there just too prideful or don't see themselves strong after telling others or are afraid of even telling others? What is your message to them?
Well, in some cases, it can be career ending. So you have to be careful. In the military in the U.S., if the commander is not of a mind that mental illness is not a weakness, but a condition that, can be treated, you could lose your job. You could use your security clearance. In some professions, physicians, dentists, veterinarians, you could lose your license if the dental board determines that you are, at risk to the patients. Um, so I say, tell anybody who you know, love, and trust what you're going through. And I would say, first item is to get evaluated. Is your depression, ordinary depression? Is it the depressive, part of bipolar disorder? What is it exactly? And I would have a physical. Sometimes physical ailments present as mental health issues. I have a friend here in town, terribly depressed, had a full panel blood workup. Turns out his body was not metabolizing iron properly. They put him on a slow released iron supplement, you can buy at Costco, and boom, depression gone. So have a mental health evaluation, have a physical to make sure it's not something physical presenting as mental. And, and then take the advice of your therapist. I would say, take the medication. In the U.S., maybe places otherwise, they have a DNA cheek swab test. You take DNA from the patient and you try to match the psychotropic, the psych medication that fits best with their metabolism. So it reduces a lot of go on, doesn't work, taper off, go on, doesn't work, taper off. It narrows down the list of possibilities. So if the one I take hadn't worked right off the bat, I would have done the cheek swab test to figure out which one's going to work best with my DNA.
When you have someone in your family or close friends who opens up about their depression or just their mind thoughts that they're circling the drain right now, how should you, as a bystander, handle that? How can you help in that moment the best way?
Well, I would say, and I tell my audiences this, if they're depressed, they admit they're depressed or you think they're depressed, I would ask them, are you having thoughts of suicide? And if they say yes, I would say, okay, do you have a plan? And if they have a plan and it's detailed, time, place, and method, you need to do your best to get them to a mental health facility right away. If it's not particularly detailed, I would say, well, are you going to kill yourself? And if they said no, I would say, yeah, well, tell me why not. Because there's something keeping them here. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having the conversation. Find out what it is. Could be parents, could be kids, could be pets, could be religion. There's some reason they're still here, and try to leverage that, and help them get whatever support they need to, because their popular belief is you should never mention the word suicide in front of somebody who's depressed, because it might make them more likely to do it. The reverse is actually true. It makes them less likely to do it if you mention it out loud.
Because then they hear it and realize it a bit more than only with the talks in their head.
Yeah, and a lot of people with mental illness, myself included, when I was dealing with it alone, I thought I was the only person, just me, which is, it seems silly now. I have a condition called chronic suicidal ideation, which is relatively rare, and I thought I was just some kind of freak, because what it means is, for me and people like me, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems, whether they're large or small. And I tell the audience, when I say small, my car broke down. I had 3 thoughts: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. And the benefit of telling that story when I speak, almost every time I've spoken, there's been at least one person in the audience who has it. They have no idea it has a name. They, like me, thought they're just some kind of freak and all alone. And all of a sudden, they realize they're not alone. I mean, people come up weeping when they found out they weren't alone. So again, that's the power of starting the conversation on suicide.
So depression is a very, very big word at the end of the day. And at least for me, it's sometimes hard to understand the difference between just a hard phase in your life where some things, some couple setbacks are happening, not everything is going accordingly to plan, and really knowing that you have depression. Sometimes you just feel bad, but also you could have the depression, but I don't really know the special definition of when you have a depression. And there is, of course, a lot of heated discussion around the topic as well, because many people think they have it but don't have it. Many people don't even know they have it. So could you clear that up for me, please?
Yes, well, I have major depressive disorder, and it's generally not situational. I've been most depressed some of the best times in my life. It's a cycle that my body goes through. Every so often, I have this 3-day cycle where I begin sliding down the first day, bottom out the second, come back up the third. And, a situation like bankruptcy, losing everything, can trigger it. But, like I said, I've been at some of the best times in my life, and I'm all of a sudden spiraling downward. So that's the difference, I think, between being sad and upset about a situation, broke up with your girlfriend or boyfriend, flunked out of college, and you're really down. It's in my DNA. It's called generational depression and suicide. Runs in my family. My grandmother committed suicide. My mom found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mom and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days, and I came close in 2010. So people ask, can you be cured of your depression? No, it's in my DNA. I could take a medication, which I do, which takes the edge off. My 3-day cycles are a lot fewer during the year than they were, and they're a little less intense because of the medication, but it's not going anywhere. Now, one of my TED Talks is Mental Benefits, the Evolutionary Advantages of Mental Illness, because I believe my depression and thoughts of suicide are just the flip side of my creativity, imagination, comedic ability. Same brain, same wiring. There's a reason when somebody heckles me at a comedy club that I can fire back in a flash, and it's not even a conscious thought. I just say, and people go, how'd you think that up? I didn't think it up. When you heard it, I heard. I have no idea where that came from. It's just the way and I see the world that way. I can teach you to write, stand up, and perform it. I can't teach you to process the incoming information the way my sort of neurodiverse brain does it. see the world, it just processes funny. Things go in, and within an instant, things come back out funny, oftentimes.
How does it physically and mentally feel when you're depressed? Could you elaborate on that?
Yes,
So,
there's these old diving suits, the ones with a big globe helmet where they had
yeah.
an oxygen and they went down, and they have to wear lead-filled boots to keep them on the bottom because you're pumping oxygen into the suit. That's what depression feels like to me, is walking around in a pair of those lead-filled boots. As it begins, it feels like somebody's actually turning up the force of gravity. So it's harder and harder to put one foot in front of the other. And really, that's my goal on those days, is just to put one foot in front of the other until it's time to go back to bed. And as it eases up, it feels like someone's turning down the force of gravity. Slowly but surely, it's easier to take those steps. So that's what, and it's at its heart, hopelessness. The feeling of hopelessness, the feeling of why bother. So, however, at 68 years old, 69 now, I was walking the dogs and I had a thought about suicide, not the act, but just the topic. And I thought to myself, Mo, wait a minute. I'm 68. What's the hurry? I mean, how much longer do I have anyway? If I was 38, yeah, let's talk about it. But 68, how many years I got left? I think I can handle it. So that was a sobering thought.
Wow. Okay. So while you told me what depression really is and how it is, I went in my mind a bit through my life, and of course there were many, many setbacks and sometimes hard phases. But the way you described it right now, I wouldn't say that I ever had a big mental disease yet. Having that said, thinking about suicide was something that when I was 14 or 15 was a topic I was very thinking about. Not with time, date, and that, but I think I got very into the near of it. Can that also happen without having a depression, or is it just a teenage phase that people just go through?
Depression, I think, is the major cause for most suicides. Um, However, a lot of people don't understand it's all about pain. People ask me when somebody famous dies, why would somebody famous, with everything to live for, want to kill themselves? And my
Mhm.
answer is, well, there's a good chance they did not want to kill themselves. They just wanted to end the pain. I have a friend now deceased. I don't think he was depressed. We worked together a number of times. He was a um, cruise director. I worked cruise ships from 2009 till COVID as a comedian, and he was working for a cruise line, got fired. That's the cruise lines are kind of like that. There was no, let's sit down, let's see what the person said he did, let's see what his opinion is of what happened, and then we'll decide what to do. They just fired him. They're famous for just, you're done. And he was in Miami, and they had him put up in a hotel, and he was on the 10th floor, and he went over the railing of the balcony. So I don't think he was depressed before that point, because we worked together quite a bit, and he knew what I did for a living. He knew that I live with mental illness. I think he would have told me if he was having similar feelings. But just in that moment, the only way out of the pain, I assume, was to end his life. And he went over the railing, and by the way, there are a number of ways to kill yourself. I would not choose that one, in part because as soon as you let go of that railing, I'm sure you're probably thinking this was a bad idea. You got time to think about it on the way down, and that just, ugh, you put a gun in your mouth, pull the trigger, done. But that long ride down, but yeah, but I don't think he was depressed. I think it was simply situational. He couldn't see a way out of the pain. Over the railing he went. Impulse. That was the only way he knew to kill himself. That's the only way he could kill himself at that moment. Didn't have a gun, didn't have medication. He could take an overdose. That was his only choice.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just so abruptly. I've been fortunate enough, or at least in Germany, it does it never happened in my close surroundings. But that being said, of course, there is the possibility that friends of mine or family members could be depressed right now or could go through a hard time. What are signs for that you should watch out when people just don't want to ask for help? But of course, we are not all Hollywood actors. We slip
Yeah.
up here and there. So, what should you watch out for in the behavior of your friends, your family, when you start to suspect something? What can be leads for that?
Yeah, good question. And that's part of what I talk about when I keynote. I go, let's talk about some signs and symptoms. They may not tell you, but if you watch carefully, listen carefully, they oftentimes eat too much or cannot eat, sleep too much or can't get to sleep. They have difficulty getting out of bed in the morning, so they're often late for work or school. However, in the afternoon, they rally like a different person. And here's one you can observe visually. In the past, they've been pretty well put together. In the last couple of weeks, hair's kind of dirty, clothes aren't quite so clean. It may be because they're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning simply to take a shower and do a load of wash. Now, the question comes up, what do you say to somebody you think is depressed? Here's what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Turn that frown upside down. Here's my favorite. Have you tried fish oil? At which point I go from suicidal to homicidal. Uh, Here's what you do say. Look, I'm here for you and I mean it. I know you're not crazy or lazy or self-absorbed. I know that depression's a mental illness. Here's the good news. With time and treatment, things will get better. I'll take the time. I'll help you get the treatment. And we've circled back to now you have to ask them in no uncertain terms, are you having thoughts of suicide? And if they answer no, but your gut tells you, I think he is. So let's say you catch them talking about death and dying a lot, or you look over the shoulder of the computer, they're Googling how to die by suicide, or suicide appears as a theme in their artwork or their music, their writing. They're getting their affairs in order, especially young people, if they're giving away prized possessions because they want to make sure the possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. And here's one that's counterintuitive, very dangerous. They've been depressed for a long time, and now they're happy for no apparent reason. And you're happy because, well, they're happy. The problem is they're happy probably because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is coming to an end. That's where we circle back to the pain. The pain is coming to an end. So those are the signs. Now, if they say they are suicidal, you and I have talked about it. What do you say? Do you have a plan? If they have a plan, what is your plan? And if it's detailed, time, place, method, you need to do your best to get them to some kind of mental health help
Yeah.
as soon as possible.
Wow. It has been one of the hardest recordings for this podcast I have ever done. And I mean that in the best way. I admire everything you do and thank you so much for everything you do for all the people out there. They're really, really suffering. Where can people go if they want to stay in contact with you or watch out for your courses or your societal prevention speaking services?
Yeah. The suicide prevention side of it is mentalhealthcomedian.com, mentalhealthcomedian.com. And if by chance you want your own TEDx or to make money as a speaker, it's howtomakemoneyspeaking.com, howtomakemoneyspeaking.com. And thank you for doing a podcast on this because, we may have saved somebody's life today. Maybe they've got chronic suicidal ideation and they've never knew it had a name and that other people had it. And they've just learned it on your podcast. And now they don't feel quite so alone and quite so like a freak. That's the reaction. I mean, people have come up crying. A woman wrote me an email about a week after we got done at the convention. She goes, Frank, I think I was there just to meet you. You've changed my life. And I can't say that about a lot of people because she had it. She thought she's a freak and all alone. And all of a sudden, wait, this is a thing? Other people
Well,
have it? You know? So that's the power of starting the conversation.
Yeah, and it just goes out to everybody that listens to that and really feels that way. Feel free to always pop me an email on the website. There's also a whole email contact form if you really don't know who to talk to. Maybe it's a stranger on the internet. Thank you so much for your time, and I would love to end this episode with the quote from the UFC fighter Paddy Pimblett, who said, "I'd rather have a mate cry on my shoulder than to go to his funeral on the next week." And I think that is the best sentence to sum it all up.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mo.